Hey guys, Jake from Full Access UTV. Hey, today we're gonna work on a Kraken and we're gonna do some upgrades. As you see, we got her up in the air. No better time to do these upgrades and make it real simple and easy to show you guys how to do this. So today we've released a couple new parts in the last few weeks, so we want to do a little video on them, and the Kraken buggy is going to be the perfect time to do this because we got to do them to that too. So for starters, I'm going to start with the carrier bearing. The carrier bearing is made out of pot metal and cast pot metal on this on the KRX 1000s, whether it's 2-seater or 4-seat. This one particularly came right out of my new 4-seater. These things just break these little ears off, and it's a known failure point. If it isn't these ears just come off, then this bearing inside, which is half the size of our bearing, completely fails. It seizes up, it gets contaminants in it, and it just fails. So this is gonna fail on your car. So if you keep your car, this is gonna fail. So you have a choice to do it now, later, whatever. But pretty much this is our new billet carrier bearing. It's got a seal on the inside, it's got a seal on the outside, and the bearing inside is twice as big. It's a Timken sealed bearing, and it's sealed on both sides as well. So no contaminants are gonna get in there and ruin this thing. And this thing's made out of a chunk of 6061 billet aluminum. It's not going anywhere, but I mean, this is nothing new. This is nothing crazy. There's other companies out in the market on it, but you know, it had to come out. We had to have it. A lot of customers have been looking for it, so it's here today. As far as the shaft itself, I'm going to have Ann show you. So this is our brand new 4340 Chromoly shaft. It comes in this sleeve. This is how it comes to your home. But for demo reasons, we were actually just doing this video and I made a huge error and we had to go back in. So you see some grease in it, but I'll cover that. So what makes that shaft different than this shaft? Multiple things. The first thing you guys are going to see is the size. The size difference here and the thickness of that metal is much different. Also, you'll see that we have some necking and we turn it down, but only to a certain spot. Let me say this. The guys from Brannick Motorsports have been building my Ultra 4 car shafts and my rock buggy shafts for years. They know a ton about shafts. That's exactly who I gave this design to, and we started talking about twisting and everything else, and that's what we came up with. There's another shaft out in the market, and it is completely solid all the way to the splines. Well, everybody kind of in rock crawling knows, has been around, or even in like Ultra 4 or anything knows, and I guess even hot rodders know, you need some design twist into a shaft. You need a shaft to be able to twist some to not break at the splines. A solid shaft's just gonna shear off the splines right at the end. It'll break it and fail right at the end. So with this, we're allowing some twist in it, and that's exactly what you need. The other huge advantage of this, it's made out of 4340 Chromoly, and it's made by Brannick. So man, I have no doubts about these shafts. It's a phenomenal shaft. It's an excellent upgrade. So with that said too, why are we changing the shaft? Well, it says there on our website, and I'm going to try to repeat pretty much what I had typed up. There is a lot of breakage in the KRXs when you start to abuse them some. Some people are just trying to make a simple wall, front end lands down, and you blow up something. So what usually breaks? Well, that's the thing. There is no answer. It's three things, and it's always the same three things. It's the front input, which the front input on a Kawasaki was a brilliant design. They built a fuse into it where it necks down to a smaller diameter so it would shear off and not throw the shock load into your front diff and blow up your front diff. So it's a known failure point, and it was designed to be a failure point. It's a good failure point. The other one is dry shafts. We've had customers who've broken one dry shaft, two dry shafts, and they've upgraded dry shafts, but they've only broken dry shafts, not even the fuse at the front diff, just the dry shaft. Very weird. And then one of the weirdest ones of all was when we started designing these was I busted a rear shaft. I put a stock one back in. I didn't have a problem again, but we had a customer who busted three. I mean, three within, I think, was a 3 to 4 month period, babe? Something like that. It was crazy, but that was his failure point of his particular car or maybe driving style. So there's no rhyme or reason why you need it. But hey, it needs upgrades, but one thing you need to know is it needs a fuse. So you got to choose where you're going to put that fuse in the system. And why do I say that? Because I learned the hard way. The Crawler KRX is completely built from the front to the back. It had a upgraded front input that didn't have that fuse built into it by Turner. and everything else was done in that car. And unfortunately, going out on our first event, we did some of the nasty hidden trails out in Sand Hollow. And I was coming up a waterfall, I did a little shock load, and boom, lost front wheel drive. Didn't know why. Bring it home, goes to the dealer, $5,900 repair because I broke the shaft right through the middle of the transmission internally. The transmission and that shaft cannot take the load. So do we build that shaft? And the thought was no, because we build that shaft, who wants to tear out their tranny? Who wants to build it? Hey, it was $5,900 with labor to do that. It was warranty. Those guys are Kawasaki's awesome, by the way. Everybody knows that. But dude, it was fixed, it was warranted, and they put it back together. But that leads to, I didn't have a fuse in the system. You got to have one. I recommend leaving that stock front input alone. Let that be your fuse. Change your drive shaft, upgrade your carrier bearing, upgrade your shaft, leave that fuse alone. Why? It's 4 little 8mm bolts to remove it and change it out on the trail. Of course, you got to bring the front diff forward and twist it to change it, but you could do it on a trail. You can't change the drive shaft on the trail. You cannot change this on a trail, the rear output. I mean, you can, but what a nightmare. I mean, a massive thing. So that's that. That's why we even came out with this thing, and I guess that's it. I'm kind of rambling off point, but hey, I'm gonna take you guys underneath the Kraken. I'm gonna show you how to remove it. I'm gonna show you how to change this shaft and the carrier bearing, and pretty much show you guys how to do it. So the first thing and the hardest thing about this is you got to break down your stock KRX. That is the hardest part. I'm not going to show you that in the video today, but I will kind of walk you through what you need to do. But the most important part is you need to move everything away from this shaft. You have to slide the whole drive shaft forward in order to take the yoke off of this rear shaft to change it and that carrier bearing. So in order to do that, you got to remove the front diff, and you don't have to remove it, but you need to loosen it and pull forward and so on and so forth. I'll have Ange jump underneath Kraken, I'll jump underneath there too. Kind of show you what I'm talking about here. So on your front diff, you're gonna have 4 bolts. You got these 2 and these 2. That's what's holding in your front diff. On the side, you're gonna have a little plastic protector, a little cover. You should unscrew that and it protects your electronics. And that is basically gonna move your front diff so you can slide it forward to get that drive shaft off. But if you have a winch, you need to remove the winch. You don't necessarily need to unwire it depending on your wiring, but set it on a milk crate, do something like that. But you gotta get it out of the way so that diff can come far enough forward. And that's one of the big keys. So the first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna unbolt the rear yoke at the rear output shaft. I'm gonna take you guys back to the table and show you that. And then you're gonna undo these. Now, with that said, you need to move everything forward, but you need to move everything forward together. And I'll take you back to the table and show you why. Okay, so on the table I have our drive shaft. This is the drive shaft that's ready and built for the Kraken buggy. If you'll notice on this side, this is your front diff input side. You'll notice there's a spring in here, and it goes under a little pressure, but that's not much holding that thing on there. There's also usually a little boot here with a little snap ring that goes around it. It's held on there, it's a little tight, but not very tight. It's not gonna hold this drive shaft together if you tried to rip this thing apart. So it's really important that you are applying pressure like this and keeping that spring and moving it forward. My advice, if you got somebody who can push on the rear drive shaft and push it forward when you move that front diff, then you're gonna be way better off. And here's why. You do not want this drive shaft to separate, because if you do, then it's gonna come out of phase. And when it comes out of phase, it's a nightmare. I mean, you almost gotta completely remove the drive shaft from the car to put it back in phase. That means pulling your axle shafts out, pulling apart the wheel bearings. I mean, doing a ton of work to remove that front diff to pull that drive shaft out of the car. Hey, if you're doing full upgrades, then you gotta do it anyways, but either way, you need to know how to phase the drive shaft. I like to show you guys really quick. Ange can show you on this side. This is the first thing you need to do when you go to remove this shaft. You're gonna have a bolt here, and you're gonna have a bolt here. And what these bolts do is your rear shaft is like this, And this slides in here. And wrong part. That keeps it from going in and out. So you want to remove this bolt, and you're going to want to remove this bolt, and I'll show you why. But as you can see, that's the groove it sits in. I've also seen a video too where they're replacing the bolts because they had a little damage to the side. You know, these bolts are good enough, guys. They're more than strong enough, but if you're really worried about it, it's a bolt. Flip it 180 degrees, mark it, hold this side when you tighten it, and blast on the nut on the other side, and it'll stay there. But you don't need to go replacing anything, but you do need to keep it together. Next thing I think you should do is take a paint mark, and you want to mark the yoke, and mine's all taped up right now. You want to mark the yoke to the drive shaft. Put a line all the way through, and mine doesn't have it right now, but I would recommend maybe doing that. That way, if it did come apart, and when you need to put it back together, you know right where it went. That's right where it was. It was in phase. You know, hopefully Kawasaki put yours in phase. I'm sure they did. But it's in phase, so that's where you want it to be. Anything out of phase, you're gonna get vibrations, shakes, tons of different issues. And that's kind of why you're in here. You're getting rid of all these vibrations in this weak spot. So you don't want to have any issues with that. So Vange goes to the other end. I'm gonna describe what in phase is. I don't think a lot of guys know this, but you got a U-joint here, and you got the caps straight up. But this yoke assembly here is solid with the drive shaft. You want the exact same yoke assembly here, matching on this side, just like this one is right now. So if you think about it in a C, U-joint cup in a C, you have one this way, and you have one this way. You want the one on the drive shaft, which is solid, being straight up and down, and then you want this one being straight up and down. You do not want it one tooth off. You do not want it 180 degrees out, because this, I guess that's obvious, it's 180 degrees out, but you need to have it totally in phase. It can't be just one spline off. One spline off is going to cause vibration for you guys, and trust me, I know of all the years of off-road and racing, that is your most important part of this whole job. I would just make sure you keep that drive shaft together. Another word of advice too, when the drive shaft's being pushed through the car, and all of a sudden you guys are starting to see this yoke in that boot, you guys can paint mark it. Get in there and paint mark it. So in case anything happened, man, you guys don't have to pull out the whole center console or the front diff to get this drive shaft out and try to phase it. So that's just a word of advice. Just spend a minute and paint mark some stuff, and then you're good. But that's it. That's the worrisome part for mostly people doing this stuff. So with that said, I'm going to jump in there. I'm going to rip out this carrier bearing in this shaft, and I'm going to show you guys pretty much how easy this job is to do once you do that. So I'm going to get my impact. So because we got the Kraken sitting here, it makes life super easy. I'm going to turn on some light in here. Hopefully you guys can see. This is a different view from a KRX from the bottom side. Most of you are not going to ever see this. But this makes getting in here and dealing with this super simple. Most of you are all going to come through this the driver's side to get to these 12mm bolts right here. And all you have to do is remove these two 12mm bolts. There's nothing else. You've already removed that drive shaft, brought it forward. And again, you don't have to bring it out of the car. You just got to get it forward and get it off to the side. Get it out of your way. So then, jump in there. Make sure I got the impact going the right way. No, I think you got my head great.
I'm getting...
Okay. We'll take that out. Okay, now, the next part of getting this out is you want to spin it about 180 degrees. So you want to spin the carrier, and then if you guys can notice, let me spin it higher. There's another nub right here. Can you see that in there, Ange? There's another nub. You just want to make sure the nub is not against here when you're trying to pull it forward. So now that it's like that, I'm just going to pull it out, and it pulled right out and went forward. So you guys may pull it out of the side or whatever, but whatever works for you. I'll bring it back to the table. Okay, so that's a shaft out of our 2-seat Kraken buggy. Pretty simple. You guys see the same process. So now there's 2 steps here, okay? The first step is, and now I have Ange come in here, is If you're just going to replace the carrier bearing, then you need to actually remove the 2 snap rings here. And I won't do that, but on this shaft, no, I guess I left it on both shafts, didn't I? I did. You got a snap ring that's right here. You need to take off this snap ring and completely remove it. The next thing you need to do is you need to pry this seal out. If you got a seal puller, great. Otherwise, take a decent sized screwdriver, keep going around, twisting out until the seal comes out. Once this seal's out, there's another snap ring in there. You got to take that snap ring out of there, and then boom, carrier bearing just comes off. So that's all you really need to do. As far as, well, I guess that's it. I mean, that's pretty much straightforward. But now, let's say you're reassembling and you're using a new shaft or the stock shaft. If you use the stock shaft, you don't have to have this metal dust shield on here. Our carrier bearing is, like I said, it's got 4 seals in this thing. You guys can remove this if you want to and just knock it off of there. It's a piece of sheet metal and it kind of just pounds on and it'll come right off of there, so no big deal. But now the next steps are going to show you guys whether you have a stock shaft going in or you're doing the upgrade at the same time. So I'm going to grab our shaft, and this is kind of where I had to edit out before. The first thing you want to do is take your new O-ring that comes with the shaft. It's a genuine Kawasaki, and you're going to roll it on and put it into the spline. You could reuse yours, but hey, we give you guys a new one anyway. So you're going to take some grease, and you guys are going to start just grease the splines up a little bit. That way you know it's going to go in and out of there easier. Hopefully never get stuck in there if you had to take it apart and do any service, or the dealer did, or anything like that. And make sure you get some grease on that new O-ring too. So you don't want to ruin that when you put it in there. Take a little more. So you guys can put this on with your finger or whatever. We just have an old bag of CV joint grease around and a brush in it. It makes it easy to do this kind of stuff. But that's about it for the grease. The next thing you want to do is you kind of want to test fit. You're going to notice that one side has your threaded bungs. The threaded bungs go towards the dry shaft, so the threaded bungs go towards the front of the car. So you want to look at it, and you're going to put it on just like that. And boom. So you can just keep going in. Well, I'm not going to go in any further. Let me just show you the next step. Okay, so with that said, I would recommend taking a little grease and putting it on the edge of these seals too. That way, you know, no matter what, it's not going to eat that seal up, and you're not going to have any problems with it. Okay, so you've greased the seal, you've done both sides. Now you want to take a little Loctite, and we give you a little thread locker in a kit, and you want to use it on here, and you're going to hardly use anything. A couple drops out of that thing. I'm going to use the shop Loctite, which apparently is frozen. But what you want to do is, if you look at this shaft, you've got the larger neck area and the smaller. Right where that bearing is going to seat, you want to put a little Loctite. And the reason being is, you want that bearing to seat to that shaft. You want them to be as one, so the bearings spin and not the inside of that race and this shaft spin, creating, you know, damage and everything else, which is another massive thing of why most people are changing out these shafts anyways, is that shaft is getting completely damaged by the bearing right here. So by doing this, then you're locking the two together to a much better quality bearing. And come on. Yeah, we're doing a video. Will you please help? Okay, and you do not need a ton of this stuff. You guys, it takes very little. If you think about it, this is almost a press fit of a bearing onto a shaft. And no matter how much you put on here, it's just going to spit out what you really don't need. So I'm just dragging my finger and rolling it and making it super light, because all it's going to do is push it up, push it into the edge, and make it a nightmare to ever come apart. If you needed it to, it actually cause more damage than you need. So again, threaded bung side with the holes, going to the front of the car, put it on there, put it in, and boom, make sure it's sitting back all the way, and that's it. Another thing you guys are going to notice is the stock one has those two C-clips. We did not put the grooves in, and we see no reason for those. whatsoever. If anything was to move and start coming apart, dude, you have a catastrophic failure on your hands, and that little C-clip is not going to do anything for you. So we didn't put them in the design. We didn't supply you guys with new ones or anything like that. If you want to put it back in your stock shaft, that's fine, but hey man, it's not needed. If you really think about what's going on in there, I mean, if this thing came forward, dude, everything, man, you're in a world hurt, probably literally, but that's it. This thing is done. I mean, this thing is just ready to go in the car. So next thing we'll do is I'll take you and show you how to put this thing in the car. Okay, I'll grab my bolts. And just line up the splines in the back. Same thing. Rotate the carrier bearing out of the way. And our splines are definitely tighter than stock. You guys are going to notice that. Man, I think I'm just about to the O-ring. So when you get here, you may need to slightly tap on this thing to get that O-ring set because it's brand new. And I am just about there. I am there. Okay. Of course, I cannot get it around. Yeah, a tiny bit more. Okay, and there we go. And that's it. And then you're going to tighten your two 12mm bolts. And if you guys are looking for torque specs, of course, we always have the torque specs for free on the website. Or recently we posted up there that we'll even print them and send them in an order if you need it. So I'm not going to tighten these all the way right now, because I'm going to come back in and torque them and paint mark them because it's the Kraken. But I'll take you guys back to the table and discuss the next recommended thing I think you guys should do. So you guys got the new shaft in. There's another known issue in these drive shafts. This drive shaft is specifically the new one for the Kraken buggy, and Tom is one of my buddies. He's been making my drive shafts for years. He literally got this, he finished it, and he said, dude, I can't balance it. And I was like, what? Couldn't believe he couldn't balance it. I had to give him parts and stuff to balance it, and he came back and he goes, no, look at this. So I'm gonna show you guys. He could not balance it because the splines and the fitment of this stuff is garbage. I mean, it is so much looseness that it goes left to right that, like he said, when he'd do a weld washer on here or something like that, it would just toss out that kind of weight and this and that because there's too much variation. When you actually compress this with a spline, it gets a little better, but you have the exact same issue on the other side, and that's down here. If you guys notice down here on this end, I'll roll this. These are a bolt basically that just allows the drive shaft and the rear output to not come in and out, and that's what you got that bolt for. But what my advice is to make this a pinch fit. So if you guys see this blue line here, you want to cut up to about this point with a cutoff wheel, and the same on this one. So like I said, now I would completely take this out of the car, but I would have paint marked up to here first, so you know right how it goes back in a car. But take a cutoff wheel, cut this one, take a cutoff wheel, cut this one, and what I simply mean is, you're just taking a cutoff wheel, you're only cutting this side, not the other, and you're going to cut all the way in to about there. What you're doing there is you're creating a pinch fit. So from now on, when you go to slide that thing on there, it may be a little tricky the first time because of like the little shards from the metal and everything, blow it off, whatever, but when you go onto it, you're going to still get that same sloppiness and stuff. Like there's people, you know, replacing these and everything else. Try this, guys, because now when you tighten this bolt down, you're going to pinch onto those splines. It doesn't matter if those splines are a little loose, just like that is. Excuse me. It doesn't matter if it's a little loose like the front. You got a pinch fit. So you can tighten that down. And that's a total fixer. I mean, that fixes the issue right there, and you don't have to worry about it. Another thing to say about this though, don't do those yet until you get everything in. So just like it was the first thing that you took off before you removed everything, make it be the last thing you put together. Let everything in the car, from the front diff back to that shaft, everything be in its happy little place before you put that in, drop in your bolts, and then tighten it down. You guys are good, golden, good to go. And I mean, you guys should be able to ride for many, many more miles. So that was probably a long video. Hopefully you guys like it. We got some more stuff coming out. Honestly, these shafts have been here since May. There's so many things going on down here in this business, man, and it's because of you guys. We're so busy, and we much appreciate it. So we're just trying to come out with little different things and odds and ends to make the KRX better, and sometimes even do some things that other people did. Just, you know, we got to get them out on the market and make it more feasible for other people to get it. So again, me and my family, we much appreciate it. Jake from Full Access UTV, guys, hey, thanks for watching.